Hey there! Welcome to our YouTube channel, folks. Ever wondered why we humans make the decisions we do? Do you ever find yourself pondering why you're drawn to certain things or why you consistently make similar choices? Today, we're diving headfirst into the captivating world of psychology and decision making. But before we dig deep into the details, let's start with the basics. What exactly is the psychology of decision making and biases? In simple terms, it's the study of how we make choices and what factors influence those choices. These factors can range from our environment and emotions to our past experiences. Now, let's chat about cognitive biases. These sneaky tricks our brains play on us can lead us to make decisions that don't necessarily make logical sense. We all have them, and they can be pretty tricky to spot. Take confirmation bias, for example. It's when we actively seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs and ignore anything that challenges them. This can lead us down a path of making decisions that might not be in our best interest. And then there's the sunk cost fallacy. This one's a doozy. It's the idea that we keep investing in something simply because we've already invested time or money into it, even if it's not worth it anymore. We end up throwing good money after bad just to avoid admitting we made a mistake. Understanding these biases and how they impact our decision-making is crucial if we want to make better choices. In this video, we'll dive deeper into these biases, give you real-life examples, and offer some tips on how to avoid their influence. So grab a seat, relax, and let's jump into the captivating world of psychology. Emotions have a massive impact on decision-making because they can heavily sway our perceptions and judgments. Research has shown that when we're in a happy mood, we tend to make more optimistic decisions, while anxiety or sadness can lead to more pessimistic choices. Emotions can also trigger biases, like the framing effect. This is when the way a decision is presented affects how we perceive it. For instance, if something is presented in a positive light, we're more likely to take risks compared to if it's presented negatively. Another factor that affects decision-making is heuristics. These are mental shortcuts we use to make quick decisions. They can be helpful, but they can also lead to biases. One example is the availability heuristic, where we judge the likelihood of an event based on how easily we can recall examples of it. This can lead to overestimating the chances of rare events if they're more memorable or prominent. Now, let's talk about the two types of thinking we engage in during decision-making: System 1 and System 2 thinking. System 1 is fast and automatic, relying on shortcuts and past experiences to make quick decisions. On the other hand, System 2 is slower and more deliberate, based on logical reasoning. Both types have their uses, but relying too heavily on System 1 can often lead to biases if we neglect to consider all the available information. Emotions and heuristics play a significant role in decision-making, so it's important to be aware of the biases that can arise in those situations. Moreover, understanding the difference between System 1 and System 2 thinking can help us make more deliberate and informed choices. Culture has a major impact on decision-making and biases. People from collectivistic cultures tend to prioritize group goals and values, while those from individualistic cultures may focus more on personal goals and values. This difference in perspective can lead to different biases. For example, individuals from collectivistic cultures may be more inclined to conform to social norms, while those from individualistic cultures might prioritize their own opinions. Another phenomenon that affects decision-making is social proof. It's the idea that people tend to conform to the behaviors and opinions of others in their social group. If a restaurant has a line outside, people may assume it's great simply because others are queuing up. This conformity bias causes people to make decisions based on the actions of those around them, even if those decisions aren't the best for themselves. A similar phenomenon is the halo effect. It's when we make broad judgments about someone or something based on a single characteristic or trait. For instance, if someone is physically attractive, we might assume they're more competent or trustworthy in other areas as well. This can impact decision-making, as we might be influenced by positive or negative perceptions of a person or brand rather than objective factors. Culture, social proof, and the halo effect all have a significant impact on decision-making and biases. It's important to be aware of these factors and strive to make decisions based on objective and relevant information, rather than being swayed by social pressures or personal biases. Another factor is overconfidence. It often causes people to overestimate their skills, knowledge, and abilities while underestimating the risks or negative outcomes associated with their decisions. Overconfidence stems from a lack of self-awareness regarding our limitations or a failure to consider all possible outcomes before making a decision. We even have footage of people overestimating their abilities and taking unnecessary risks. The anchoring effect is when people's decision-making is influenced by the first piece of information they receive related to a decision, known as the anchor. Once the anchor is set, people tend to rely too heavily on it, even if it's not the best indicator of the decision at hand. For example, if we're comparing houses priced at $500,000 and $1 million, the $500,000 house may seem like a great deal because it's compared to the higher-priced house. However, if we were to evaluate the $500,000 house in isolation, we might realize it's still expensive for what it offers. The anchoring effect can lead to biased decision-making because it places undue emphasis on the initial information received. Another influential bias is the loss aversion bias. It refers to the tendency for people to strongly prefer avoiding losses over acquiring equivalent gains. In other words, the fear of losing something carries more weight than the potential for gaining something of equal value. This bias can lead to risk-averse decision-making, where individuals are more likely to stick with what they have rather than taking a chance on something new, even if the potential gain outweighs the potential loss. Status quo bias is another factor that affects decision-making. It refers to the tendency to prefer the current state of affairs over making changes. People often feel more comfortable with what they're familiar with, even if objectively better options exist. This bias can hinder innovation and prevent individuals from exploring new opportunities or making necessary changes. The availability bias is a cognitive bias that occurs when people make judgments and decisions based on readily available information, rather than considering all relevant information. It's related to the ease with which examples or instances come to mind. For example, if we're asked to estimate the likelihood of a specific event, we might rely heavily on recent or vivid examples that come to mind easily, rather than considering a broader range of data. This bias can lead to distorted perceptions of risk and probability. Finally, there's the confirmation bias, which is the tendency to seek, interpret, and favor information that confirms our existing beliefs or hypotheses while ignoring or discounting conflicting information. This bias can create an echo chamber effect, where individuals surround themselves with like-minded people or sources that reinforce their own views. It can prevent us from critically evaluating alternative perspectives and making well-informed decisions. It's important to recognize and be aware of these biases in decision-making. By understanding them, we can strive for more objective and rational decision-making processes, actively seek diverse perspectives and information, and challenge our own assumptions and beliefs.